Hello everyone and welcome back to our Lost Eidolons playthrough, as my doggy goes running all over the place. Um, Last time we recovered Michael's Aegis, and we took it for ourselves, because it turns out apparently Francisco didn't really want it, so I took it, based off of what he said. Now we could go and, what I am thinking about doing today. Okay, we have 22 codex entries. Yeah, we're going to do a codex reading episode, and if we have time, we'll talk with Johanna. And then I think we'll have one more codex episode. Maybe. Man, all the way back to Viturin. And even later. That's how long it's been since all the way back to Edie. That's how long it's been since I last read through all of this. Start with the route at Ferda. An infamous battle that would lead to the end of the War of Unification. Following a string of victories across Florient, Ludovictus of House Zerpiel found himself delayed at Ferda, along with much of his army, after an early snowstorm. Seizing the opportunity, Allied forces surrounded the fortress and cut off all supplies, a desperate effort to defeat the would-be emperor in one fell swoop. After several days of fighting, the forces of House Zerpiel were on the brink of defeat, and their surrender seemed inevitable. However, unbeknownst to his foes, Ludovictus ordered his troops to gather the armor of fallen enemy soldiers and dispatched a number of messengers in disguise. Offering promises of wealth and land, Ludovictus secured key alliances with previously neutral kingdoms. I'm willing to bet it was House Sobek and the other one that fled, the other coward. And surprise reinforcements began to harry the Allied ranks from behind. Facing mounting losses and growing panic among their troops, the Allied lords withdrew one by one, and the alliance crumbled. All who remained were soon crushed in a final bloody massacre that laid the foundations of the empire to come. Dragon's Dance. There lived a sect of weather worshippers in a high mountain valley. So this is about the sword that we got, or at least where it came. Little remains of their civilization, save for a handful of relics and ruined tablets. We speculate that their culture was magically gifted and deeply religious. The majority seem to have worshipped a deity of thunder and lightning whose name has been lost to time. On storm-tossed nights, their high priests would gather in celebration, wielding ritualistic blades to call down the lightning. Ancient Artemesia, Volume 2. Lita. A native of Liviu, Lita has led a hard life ever since winter fever took the lives of her parents. Forced to care for her younger brother Giuseppe, she became a capable hunter and trapper, carving out a precarious life for the two of them in the harsh eastern wilderness. Yet despite Lita's best efforts to stay clear of Imperial army patrols, the pair were eventually captured and conscripted, forced to fight for the Empire until their troops were defeated by Eden's forces. As a newly recruited rebel, Lita lends support where needed, but always stays close to Giuseppe's side. She dreams of earning a sizable fortune, returning home, and building a house along her favorite river, which I respect immensely. Okay? Thank you. Siege warfare. An ancient pillar of military tactics, siege warfare entails protracted conflicts for control of castles and other fortified positions. Once the sole provenance of great armies and those who could command them, today siege warfare is as common as outright infantry skirmishes, owing to the proliferation of landholding lords under the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the Ludovictan Empire. In prosperous times, when castle storehouses are fully supplied, sieges can take years with little actual fighting. Today, as the Scorched Earth campaign of House Fenice ravages farmlands across Artemesia, sieges have become faster and more violent, with defenders seeking to rout attackers as swiftly as possible, and attackers attempting to undermine defenses via wit and guile. Throughout the interregnum period, many strategically located castles have changed hands multiple times, often within days. Dang. Bandits. Since ancient days, bandits have plagued the continent of Artemesia, their numbers waxing and waning with the general well-being of the common people. Whoops. They tend to arise from the poor and desperate, particularly neglected veterans following wars marked by mass conscription, and most often turn to lives of predation as a means of basic survival. That would be little Hector, eh? Among the common peoples, bandits' reputations vary based on their targets. Those who prey on the poor are reviled. Those who target the wealthy, on the other hand, enjoy widespread public support. and are often mythologized into folk heroes, which if I were desperate and doing it as a means of survival, I'd target the wealthy and merchants. As the number of bandits in a region tends to indicate the failures of local nobility, and as pointing this out can invite punishment, one often finds the paradoxical phrase, "no bandits here," on merchants' maps, marking particularly dangerous areas. Some scholars believe this to be the world's oldest recorded example of satire. Wouldn't be surprised. Edie, shopkeeper and former priestess of the now outlawed Aristan faith. She certainly looks a lot more distinguished than that now. While her religious practices would ordinarily cause her to be targeted by the Empire, she was permitted a certain degree of latitude by Lord Abelard in exchange for her service in times of need. After his defeat, Edie changed sides and joined up with Eden's forces after some convincing. An unfailing optimist with flawless manners and a strict moral code, Edie looks for the best in others and demands the best of herself. For these reasons, she often clashes with the jaded soldiers and mercenaries she now finds herself surrounded by. Nonetheless, even her most stubborn critics know better than to mistake her chivalry for naivete. When she's not helping others, Edie enjoys collecting, duplicating, and distributing banned literature, particularly Benerian operas. Nice. The Interregnum. With the defeat of Prime Minister Morin's forces at Lyriar and the subsequent fall of the Ludovictan Empire, the continent of Artemesia has entered a period of rapid reinvention marked by intense civil upheaval. With no centralized government, the question of where the authority rests and why has been blown wide open, upending existing social order and sparking widespread conflict between various shifting factions. Most powerful among them are the armies of Ballastar Fenice, now the self-titled king of Benerio, following a successful coup attempt against the late Abramo Orsio, but his rule and attempts at conquest beyond Benerio's borders remain heavily contested by the nobility of old. Only time will tell if the Fenice forces can successfully forge battlefield victories into a lasting dynasty, or will themselves be deposed by some challenger yet to emerge. Michael's Ages. Let's see if mercantilism is actual mercantilism or a different kind, specific to this universe. Long ago, in the lonely mountains, there lived a shivering beast, longing for warmth that devoured unsuspecting travelers and drank their steaming blood, but no matter how much it consumed, the cold persisted. One day, amid a fearsome blizzard, an orphan of war staggered into the beast's lair, his fingers frozen and teeth chattering. As the beast stooped to devour him, the orphan suddenly embraced its breast, offering thanks for the shelter. Shocked, the beast began to weep. When the blizzard had passed, the creature was gone, and its tears had frozen into glistening gems. Together with stone from the mountain's bones, the boy had crafted a mighty shield with the hope of bringing peace to the world. Ramirez Fairy Tales, The Orphan and the Beast. House Cerasus, an old-blooded family closely tied to House Zerpiol, famed for producing countless skilled warriors. House Cerasus makes frequent appearances throughout the military history of Artemesia. House Patriarch Gustave Cerasus joined Ludovictus's cause during the unification, and Cerasus bannermen comprised the bulk of infantry forces. Following the unification, Gustave was named High Commander, charged with leading the imperial army as a whole and stamping out dissent wherever it arose. Recently, the house was rocked by scandal, and Gustave was tried and executed for unnamed treason, and Caspar the Viper appointed in his place. Mercantilism. Prior to the empire, Artemisia's economy was richly commercial, with the bulk of financial transactions driven by the great houses, rooted in the exchange of regional goods and currencies. With the empire's rise and forced transition to a gold standard, the continent was thrust into a brutal agrarian economy where markets were dominated by the acquisition of everyday necessities like food. All transactions were centrally controlled and taxed. With the empire's dissolution has come chaos, but also a newfound enterprise. Where titled nobility once reigned, city craft guilds and trading houses gain increasing influence as the sole source of basic necessities for much of Artemesia. Elsewhere, independent traveling merchants are on the rise, providing things like specialty goods, luxury items, and imports. Though no longer officially minted into coinage, gold persists as the most common commodity of exchange, pointing to a coming age when those with wealth will wield more power than ever. In reality, mercantilism was a mix of that and also the wealth that was generated through the exploitation of colonies. And that was the main thing of mercantilism, unlike capitalism, where it's mainly through the profiteering accumulation of capital based off of the exploitation of labor. Communications. Though widespread literacy is a recent change in Artemesia, written letters are nothing new. For those of noble birth, hawks and couriers have long been the norm. For commoners, methods have varied over time. Prior to the unification, village taverns served as informal post offices. For the price of a drink, one could usually find someone capable of composing or deciphering a letter, as well as a traveling merchant to carry it. After the unification, the imperial post gradually supplanted these ways. Letters and parcels crisscrossed the empire at impressive speeds, but whether one's cargo reached its destination intact largely depended on the size of the accompanying bribe. Since the war began, mail has ground to a halt. Written communication is often seized and searched the instant it's discovered. Those in possession of anything deemed suspicious are jailed as spies until proven otherwise. As a result, real spycraft has grown even more common and creative. Today, it is not unusual for something like a scouting report to arrive in a general's hands by way of an old woman's shopping list. Interesting. The right to rule. The question of whence authority derives is one that has vexed philosophers throughout history. In ancient times, power was derived from livestock and land. Those who sought it embarked on campaigns of conquest and offered little pretense for their actions. As warlords and fiefdoms gave way to houses and kingdoms, power settled most readily with those who provided stability. Among the great houses, leaders who held the trust of the people were regarded as untouchable. Those who lost it seldom lived long. Under imperial reign, power rested with the crown, flowing downward by decree through a complex bureaucracy rife with corruption. Since its collapse, the matter of right to rule has become one of heated contention. As civil war rages across land, the old nobility cling to their titles by hereditary claim, while new forces proclaim their authority via popular mandate or moral necessity. The most militant faction, the forces of Balstar Fenice, take after the warlords of old, eschewing abstract philosophical justifications for power in favor of simple, violent assertion. Involuntary servitude. Since ancient time, forced labor of varying sorts has plagued the peoples of Artemesia. Though outright slavery has been abolished for centuries, various interested powers have ensured that more oblique forms persist, including prison labor, military conscription, and indentured servitude. One of three still exists in the world today. Modern world, outside of Artemesia. One noteworthy example, the mines of Nibosa, where all citizens are required to serve for a variable number of years upon coming of age. Though the rest of the continent tends to regard such practices as outdated and barbaric, northern coal and iron are nonetheless traded at markets everywhere, and the prison camp at Vuger, fueled by an influx of former imperial soldiers, has become a key source of such metals for Balstar Fenice's forces. Yeah, I figured Corral was kind of lying through his teeth. Balstar's conditions may have been harsher than the rest of Nibosa, but he followed the tradition. Noble retainers. A great philosopher once wrote, "Power rests upon the throne, but is wielded by those beside it." Throughout history, few constants persist so readily between rulers as reliance on a single second in command for everyday duties. While titles and responsibilities vary, retainer is the general descriptor used widely today. Retainers fill a variety of roles based on the needs of the nobles they serve. Some act as advisors and diplomats, others as personal bodyguards or military generals. Most hail from the houses of the lesser nobility, inheriting their position via familial vow of service, as with the Coios and Orcios of Old Benario. Between retainers, back-channel communications have always been an open secret. On the other hand, the outright changing of allegiances, historically almost unheard of, has become increasingly common in recent years for a number of reasons, most notably the sudden expiration of one's former master. The search for immortality. Among mages and healers, there is no known magic that can halt the effects of aging nor restore life to the dead. Nonetheless, myths and folklore persist across Artemesia. In Corsarinda, sailors tell of a witch who sought to achieve eternal youth by luring brave captains into her bed, then devouring their hearts. For her crimes, the gods granted her wish, but cursed her to live forever as a shriveled crone. Today, she is known as the Howling Hag and is said to be the source of all hurricanes. In the oral tradition of Uruvier, tribal ancestors are often described with ages in the hundreds. Most scholars believe this to be a discrepancy in dating systems, but the lake tribes insist that the waters of Lake Ikikuni once had healing effects, which have faded over time. In recent years, as the emperor's advancing age has become a matter of genuine concern, Rumors have begun to emerge that his inner circle has been searching for a means to extend his life. The specifics of their research, however, remain clouded by conspiracy and the chaos of war. Right, matters of the soul. Whether by subjugation or lack of interest, the people of Artemesia are generally not particularly spiritual. For hundreds of years, the Aristan Church was the most prominent religious presence on the continent. Humble ministry, its doctrine was mostly one of quiet service, with magically skilled clerics roaming from town to town and rendering aid where needed. Since the church's destruction, nothing has risen to fill the void. Today, spiritual beliefs vary from place to place, but are largely unconcerned with such lofty affairs as the origins of humanity. When it comes to matters of the soul, Artemesians seem more interested in spiritual philosophies that help navigate the ethical challenges of imperial life, such as how to best apportion food during a famine. Curiously, the word gods has persisted in the language as an interjection expressing shock or dismay. Which specific gods the word refers to and what role they have in human affairs has seemingly been lost to time. I like that. That's cool. Borislav. Towering over most of his peers with an aura of stoic intimidation, Borislav certainly looks the part of a noble's household guard, yet many who meet him find themselves surprised by his eloquence and mild demeanor, particularly with regard to his spirituality. Though practice of the Aristan faith has been outlawed, Borislav is a dutiful worshipper and can often be found in silent prayer. For this reason, it was inevitable that he would eventually become the target of persecution as a young man. Refusing to renounce his beliefs, Borislav was slated for death until the courageous intervention of Karel of House Volisica. Thereafter, Borislav swore an oath to protect Karel and devoted himself to strenuous training in order to meet the task. Nonetheless, his mission failed and Karel was slain. Now Borislav has offered his services to Eden, a path he hopes will allow him to keep his honor and devotion to his faith, while seeking to avenge his fallen lord. Veteran. An imperial soldier formerly stationed at Furta, the fortress of the southern gate of Florient province, which overlooks the road to the capital. Actually, the former commander of Furta. As a border guard, Veteran's daily duties consisted of enforcing the arbitrary and ever-shifting customs laws of a corrupt bureaucracy. Though he never loved the Empire's laws, he nonetheless strove to do his job well, but became gradually disillusioned by the culture of bribery and nepotism. Eventually, he was promoted to captain, not because of his work, but because of his family's connections. From then on, Veteran became a jaded realist, doing the bare minimum his duties required, and not one iota more. When Eden's forces captured Furta, he surrendered and defected on the spot. After years of silent drudgery, Veteran now fights passionately for a cause he believes in. Giuseppe. In the wilderness of Liviu province, wildflowers bloom even in the harshest of places. The same is true of those born there. The child of refugees who attempted to make a home in that dangerous land, Giuseppe was not much younger than his sister Lita when their parents were lost to fever. Left to face the world together, the two worked to care for one another and outrun the dangers of the growing war, but eventually stumbled across an imperial patrol and were conscripted. When their troop was defeated by Eden's forces, they were all too happy to change sides. Though he idolizes his older sister, Giuseppe often finds himself apologizing on Lita's behalf for her blunt, untamed demeanor. That said, years of lean living have had their effect on Giuseppe too, as evidenced by an unfortunate proclivity for kleptomania. Stella. A free-spirited soul, Stella lives by the motto "time is money," blowing wherever the winds of fortune take her. As those winds have increasingly brought her to the rebel camp, Stella has become a familiar face among the soldiers, stopping in to supply the beleaguered troops with food, liquor, and knickknacks in exchange for gold and tales of glory. Despite her sunny demeanor, Stella leads a hard life, always one bad transaction away from a night without supper. Desperate for a change and tired of going it alone, she's decided to forgo her wandering ways and enlist with Eden's forces in exchange for a once-in-a-lifetime chance at fortune and adventure. Pavlo. A fixture of the Benirian countryside, Pavlo is a local peddler who traffics in basic trade goods between villages like Mora and Kolis, but calls Lynetta home. The reputation for being a bit long-winded, it's not unusual for people to duck out of sight when Pavlo approaches, lest they lose half their afternoon in conversation. Nonetheless, Pavlo is widely understood to be an honest man and a dependable business partner, generally beloved by all. When Eden and his mercenary crew first left Lynetta, Pavlo nearly went with them, but for his ailing mother. With her recent passing, there's no longer anything keeping him there, so he's finally come to join the fight. Though some may be skeptical of his presence on a battlefield, Pavlo is surprisingly reliable in combat, if only for the strangely positive boost in morale his presence seems to bring. And finally, the Berserker boy, Raphael. Man, that's a sweet accompanying image. He looks every bit the Viking Berserker. Former personal guard to Karel of House Volisica, Vilisica, Raphael joined Eden's camp after the death of his lord. As the eldest and most accomplished son of a wealthy mining family, Raphael would be the natural choice to inherit, if not for the indelicate circumstances of his birth. Born of his father's infidelity with a Benarian singer, Raphael is a bastard. Yet despite his origins, Raphael was never treated as lesser by Corel, a fact that inspired fierce devotion. Now that Corel has been slain, Raphael hopes to avenge him on the field of battle and return home with enough glory to outshine his father's shame. Whew, that was quite the codex read. Now, I could end the episode here, but we might as well talk with Johanna, and then we'll end the episode there.
Hello.
Oh, I've read a lot. Haven't thought of anything. Sorry? I said I would come up with a list of topics next time I felt like chatting, but I don't have any.
Yes.
I see. But that doesn't mean we can't still hold a conversation, right? We could talk about strategy or something like that if you want.
Yes.
That would be acceptable. Good, I've actually been meaning to ask you something. Starting to see how every tactician takes a different approach. For example, the old man's plans are wild and unexpected. Albrecht is careful and thorough. I was wondering where that puts you. I've been told my advice often comes off as cold. Cold? When you're heading towards a place, there are always distractions on the road. A boulder in your path, a scenic overlook, a group of passerby. When I make battle plans, these are the things I ignore. Isn't that sort of negligent or something? Matters most to me is achieving an objective, quickly, accurately, without problems. Everything else is just noise. I see now. That explains why you're with Clara. We have a similar outlook. I'm glad we had this conversation. I think this is the most I've heard you talk yet, and I got to know you a little better. I suppose that's true. It's been a while since I've said more than a few words to anyone but Clara. Well, mouths are made for talking. So don't go keeping yours shut all the time, alright? If you'd like someone to chat with, you can talk my ear off anytime. I'll keep that in mind. And that goes for strategy too. My door is always open. Or at least my temp file. You never know, someday I might need one of those ice-cold plans of yours. Like now. We'll see. Alright, that's where this episode ends. Till next.